What's going on, everyone? So we got some new rumors in regards to Scream in general. One is something that has kind of been rumored for a while in regards to, well, I guess both have kind of been rumored for a while, but one of them is that even after Scream 7, they have plans of continuing to make films, right? That they don't want to stop at Scream 7. I've talked heavily about this. Even without the rumors, I have talked for basically since Scream 5 that they're going to keep making movies. One, I mean, you can tell just by with everything that happened, this would have been a great time to kind of just pump the brakes and take a little hiatus. But instead, they're trying to pump out a new film as soon as possible. A lot of that is they just spent, $500 million on the rights to Scream and, a whole catalog, but Scream was the grand prize. So they're trying to make their money back and as much money as possible. So they're going to pump out as many films as possible. So that isn't a real surprise. And another thing that has, again, kind of been rumored for a while now, but is kind of recirculating, is Scream the series. That they want to not only create a film, but they also want to create a series. Now, obviously, we have the TV series, which I enjoyed. I know most people seem to enjoy it. I know some people are kind of like iffy on it. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. I think it's a fun, different take on Scream, right? Season 3 has actual Ghostface in it. Seasons 1 and 2, they have their own story with the Brandon James thing, which we still have no answer for, right? Spoiler alert, it ends on a cliffhanger and you have no answer for it. I don't really think that's a spoiler because I didn't spoil what that cliffhanger is, but point is, we don't know. And there have been a lot of talks about them maybe kind of circling back and potentially keeping that going. There was like a year or two ago now, like a good chunk of the cast were all like together in LA, like at the beach. And it sparked all of these rumors of like, oh, they're there for the series. Like they're bringing back, the new season. They're going to go back to the Brandon James story and all that stuff. And turns out that no, they all were just there for different things. It was just kind of a coincidence, right? And now it's been long enough to know, like, oh no, it really is just a coincidence. But look, the series, there's so many ways that they can go about making the series. Kind of touched on some before. It sounds like they want to do something that actually ties into the film. So the idea is like, you basically create a series that builds characters that then can kind of bleed into the actual films themselves, maybe even launch into an independent film itself, which I do think would be cool. That kind of does make sense, right? Or maybe even something that kind of explains the aftermath, like, something like Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., if you remember that show. Remember how Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It wasn't like directly tied into the films, but kind of gave you a little like backstory and insight to like the aftermath of certain things, and kind of built some characters that you got to see, and like Coulson and stuff like that, right? So I do think that there's potential in that regard, kind of create this universe where the series is connected to the films, and if there's some loose ends with the character, that character can then kind of fall back into the series, and you kind of explain and clue in, right? Like, so for example, let's say the core four was still around, right? I know they're not, but let's just say for argument's sake they were, right? And we want to know like what's the aftermath, right? Like what's going on? Like, what happened to Chad? What happened to, Tara? What's going on with their relationship? Like, you could kind of make a film that kind of ties into that. You could also expand and build characters, right? Like Kirby being an FBI agent. Like, that's kind of the most easiest, natural direction in which they could go. They could kind of make this whole like series around Kirby as an FBI agent. It's something that I've touched on. I touched on like when we found out Kirby was that. So it's been like a year since the last time I touched on that idea. Maybe I'll kind of do an updated version because we've had Scream 6 since then. So stay tuned for that video. Maybe I'll make that a video. But like the point is, like, look, I'm all for more Scream, right? The more Scream, the merrier. I am totally okay with it. Again, I liked personally the Brandon James story. My guess is that they would kind of go back to like the Scream season 3 version where you actually get Ghostface and Roger Jackson's probably back. Like they probably go that route. Um, would be my guess. I don't think that they'll kind of make it its own thing like Scream the series originally was, where it literally was. It was like an anthology series almost in Scream. New story, new direction. There was always like a camp of people that wanted kind of the series in Brandon James' story, and people still do, right? Like every time I make a video about the series and what could potentially be, I usually get a comment from somebody that's like, "Oh man, they should tie the Brandon James story into the actual Scream movies or have some of the characters," which you could, right? Like we don't have no we don't know if it's in the same universe or not. We just know that it's its own thing, right? So like the Lakewood cast and everything, you could bring them in. I mean, even some of the surviving characters from the third season you could kind of bring over. And the third season's kind of the season people don't really like, which I do understand. I mean, I've watched it a couple times. The more that I watch it, the more I kind of like it. Like the first time I saw season 3, I was really disappointed in it. Part of it is probably because they kind of screwed us, right? Like for those that were fans of the show, you were all invested in the first 2 seasons, and then you get left on a cliffhanger, and you're like, "Oh, here we go!" And then they announce the third season, and then they announce that it's its own thing entirely, and it was like, what? Like, and then it was like, "Oh, it's cool they're bringing back Ghostface, but still, like, we need to know what's happening. We need to know what's going on." And unfortunately, that never ended up happening. And so I think inherently people kind of had a bad taste in their mouth when it came to the third season. But I also thought the third season was kind of, I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. Like I just felt like the first 2 seasons were just so much better executed. I felt like they just kind of, it almost felt like a series, like a season where they were like, "Oh, we got Ghostface, that'll be enough," right? It's kind of how it felt. But nonetheless, it has its audience, just like some of the Scream movies, right, aren't as well received as others, right? Even like Scream 3 is kind of like a mixed bag for people. People either love it or they hate it. So I don't know. Like to me, regardless, give me more Scream. I'll take as much Scream as possible, right? Like you could force feed me all the Scream content you want, right? Like so if we could get a series, beautiful. I think more likely than not what'll happen is it'll be a series that ties into the films to some degree, to some capacity, which again is fine. I'd like to see, different connections and character building and, like, for example, right after Scream 5, it was a little people weren't super sold on Sam, right? Like people were really disappointed in Sam and felt like she wasn't the right choice going forward. Well, if you had the series, you could have maybe continued and branched off and built more of a story around Sam, right? Like, or it would have been kind of cool. Like you could have even like maybe had Sam be a killer behind closed doors and have things tied, right? Like, because I mean, it makes sense that you'd want to kind of go, I guess, the Marvel route where you build these stories, you build these characters, you do these things through the series that then tie into the actual films. Problem with that is not everybody watches the series. Not everyone watches all of it. And then, because you really have to hit on that, right? If the series is terrible and you're trying to have that tie into the films, and people are like, like you have, the problem is like, you're now obligated to hit on both. Where, you look at some of the Marvel series and some of them were atrocious, right? Some of them were bad and like no one watched them. And then they introduced a character in a film and everyone was like, no one cared about the character or the film because again, you used, like you introduced that character into a series that no one cared about, that no one watched, no one cared to watch because it was bad. So you kind of run that risk also of like, if the series is bad, well then it's going to make it kind of hard to pick up in the film, and everyone's kind of like, wait, like who's this? Why is this person in it? Like, and you basically establish them in the series. But again, I'm not going to complain about more Scream, right? I'm all for, and we'll explore different directions and possibilities on what they could do with the series. Because look, I believe that they're going to make a series sooner rather than later. Like, genuinely, I think that they will, because it's just they've talked about this so much the last, like, every couple months we get a new rumor that they're planning on working on a series, and eventually they're going to just do it, I think. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you want a Scream series? Do you think no, stay away from the Scream series? Do you think that they should redo or continue the Brandon James story? Um, I feel whatever your thoughts are. Love to hear it. Let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, what are you doing? Hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.